Hello and welcome back to Slightly Spoiled. My name is Elise. Today we're going to be talking about The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden, okay? One of the worst books I've ever read. If you unironically enjoyed this book and hearing somebody talk negatively about it would make you feel attacked in a personal way, I totally understand that, and I think this is where we should part ways. Maybe check out one of my other episodes. This is not the one for you. I love to DNF a book. If I start something and I'm not feeling gripped by it in the first 50 pages or so, see you later. I probably got it from the library anyway, so who cares? Every now and then I start a book that I hate so much that it does the horseshoe effect where it comes right back around to being a blast. And Housemaid is one of those books. I am a massive fan of mystery as a genre. Thriller less so, but I enjoy it when it's well done. I feel that this woman, Frieda McFadden, is doing such damage to this genre, and I'm so serious about that, okay? I read a book by her a while ago called Never Lie, and I should have learned from that experience because it was just so terrible. I entered into that book expecting dumb fun. Maybe it's not going to be that well written, but I'm going to feel on the edge of my seat. I'm going to feel, surprised by a twist at the end. And in fact, I thought the twist was completely out of nowhere in the worst way possible. And it was just not a fun book at all. Again, I should have learned my lesson from that. But The Housemaid is so popular. It's one of the biggest books of the last decade, easily. And it has now a 3-book series. A huge movie adaptation of it just came out, which I will be talking about mostly at the end because I have seen that movie and I actually think it's a lot better than the book, and a lot of the changes that it made, I'm totally in support of. I think it's great that reading has become really popular in the last couple years. I mean, it's the reason that I kind of got back into it as an adult, as many people did. And I also think it's great that people are recognizing reading as just a fun hobby, that it doesn't have to be serious, that it can just be something that entertains you, just like a TV show or a movie would. You sit home on a Friday night, drink a glass of wine, and read a book that you know isn't going to be good or life-changing, but you're going to have a good time doing it. Switch your brain off and read a fun book. I'm all for that. But you know whose brain I think should be switched on? The author. Yeah. And the editor. And there should be an editor. And I'm not convinced with this book that there is an editor. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to more than slightly spoil The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden today, and I hope that you will enjoy the ride along with me. But before we do that, of course, I have to talk about what I'm feeling spoiled by today, and that is my new espresso machine. So I'm a big coffee person. I love to make myself a little drink every day. For years, I've been using an AeroPress, which I swear by. I love that thing. It's like $30, and it makes great coffee. It's kind of like a French press, immersion brewing, but it's different than a French press. Anyway, the AeroPress makes delicious coffee, and it's really inexpensive, but it does kind of take some time. It's a little bit more involved and it's challenging to get right, I find, but I've gotten it right. And I love that thing. Getting a real deal espresso machine for me has been a pipe dream, long in the future, because they're really expensive and you're going to be spending many hundreds, if not $1,000 on even kind of a lower end espresso machine. And it's if I'm going to be spending that much money, I'm going to get something really nice. A couple years from now, sure, I'll get an espresso machine. And then Aaron's coworker was selling their Breville Express, I think it's called, for a crazy price because they weren't using it. The machine is not new, but it's barely used. And so of course we had to buy it. It was a great deal. I was so excited for him to bring it home. It's gorgeous on my little coffee station. It's been fun to do all the research and the coffee is delicious. But the unforeseen positive of this is that Aaron is obsessed with this machine, you guys. He never really makes me coffee because he doesn't love coffee. So I don't care. I like to make my own coffee, no big deal. But he's an engineer, and I really underestimated how much he'd be excited about, the pressure gauge and all the equipment and getting the numbers just right. I mean, he is into it. I'm literally feeling spoiled by it. It's not just, this new machine, I'm loving it. It's I'm actually getting princess treatment because my husband feels excited to use this new toy of his and I get delicious lattes from it. It's just a win-win. That's enough positivity for the day. We're going to talk about The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden. The main character of this book is named Wilhelmina Calloway. She goes by Millie, okay? And we learn at the beginning of the book that she just got out of a 10-year prison sentence. She is out on parole. We don't know what she did, but it clearly wasn't good because she went to prison for 10 years. And by the way, she's in her mid-20s. She was locked up in her teens. One tactic employed by, in my opinion, not very good mystery and thriller writers is the withholding of information for no reason. It just kind of manufactures tension. We learn on page 1 that Millie just got out of prison for 10 years. And she is our first person POV character. So she's telling us this story, basically. We learn 85% of the way through the book what she did to land in prison. And it's not a twist. It doesn't like spoil what happens later in the book, because maybe if that were the case, I would understand. It just kind of plants seeds for what happens later in the book, which in my opinion, that's a good thing, right? You should let those seeds be planted. In a mystery or a thriller, usually toward the end of the book, you're getting lots of reveals and you're finding out a lot of information. But in my opinion, that shouldn't be information that I was entitled to at the beginning of the book. Do you know what I mean? I also think it's risky as an author to wait that long, because when you give me 85% of a book to wonder, what did she do? Oh my gosh, I'm creating theories in my mind. You better be dropping some crazy information for me. Otherwise, I've probably thought of something crazier. And in my opinion, the reason why Millie went to prison in the first place was not that crazy. And I think if you're going to bring it 85% of the way through the book, you need to go there. Like she killed her whole family, or she blew up a church, or something wild and crazy. When she's 16, she walks in at her boarding school on her friend getting assaulted by a member of the football team. And she angrily grabs like a paperweight or something and smashes this guy's head in and murders him. Listen, I'm not saying murder is good. I'm not. And I'm not saying that she should have murdered this guy. I think she should have just like called the police. But she was a teenage girl who flew into a rage because she witnessed her friend being traumatized by a demon. At the beginning of the book, Millie's out on parole. She is living in her car because she had been fired from her job that she worked at a bar, and she also couldn't make rent on her apartment, I think it was, so she got evicted. So she is lying to her parole officer at the moment because she is supposed to be employed and supposed to be living under a roof. You know, that's a violation of her parole. Technically, she should go back to jail. Also, 85% of the way through the book, we learn why she got fired from this job, which is that she had a coworker named Kyle who was a major creep. He was always like groping her and making weird comments. And one day she got really upset and punched him in the face. It's pretty much the same story as her original arrest in a different font. You know, kind of lazy if you ask me, but I can't go into everything that's really lazy about this book. So at the start of the book, Millie is like rock bottom, right? She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have a place to live. She's in basically imminent danger of going back to prison, and she has no friends or family that she talks to. Now, this to me is another reason why I think Frieda McFadden waited until 85% of the way through the book, because if I hadn't been analyzing this book like it was my, literature class assignment, I probably wouldn't have noticed this either. But it's a big thing that Millie has been outcast at the beginning of this book. She doesn't have anyone who talks to her, no family, no friends, and that simply does not make sense given the circumstances of her original arrest. What happened to the girl who she basically saved from this bad situation, right? Why are her family members not talking to her? She did kill someone. I understand that she might be cut off from a person or two as a result of that. You're telling me that not a single person wanted anything to do with someone who flew into a rage to protect their friend who was being assaulted? I don't believe that. I think that you can more easily get away with, oh, no one's talking to me because I just got out of prison for 10 years, when you don't explain the reasoning and you just leave the reader to, use their own imagination about why that might be. But thinking about it logically, it doesn't make a ton of sense for this girl to be completely alone in the world. She's looking around for work. She gets an opportunity to interview for a position as a housemaid for the Winchester family. And this job seems perfect. It's a married couple named Nina and Andrew. They're super rich. They live in a gorgeous house. They have a child who I think is about 9 years old, Cecilia, and it is a live-in position. So she would have to cook, clean, occasionally take care of this child, and she would get paid handsomely, it sounds like. I don't know that they ever really discuss her salary or that like the reader ever gets to know, but it sounds like she makes pretty good money and she gets to live there as well. So she is really hitting it off with this woman, Nina. She seems really great. They're bonding. Of course, pretty much everything on Millie's application and resume is a total lie, but somehow Nina doesn't seem to notice that. And so the interview is going really well. She even gets a tour of like the housemaid quarters that she would be living in. And they're a little bit weird, to be honest. Again, this house is massive. There's like a movie theater, crazy landscaping, and then you get to the housemaid quarters and they're like a little bit sketchy. First of all, there's a door that leads to the quarters that's like thicker than all the other ones. There's this really kind of spooky, dark staircase leading up. And then the actual room that she would be living in is basically a closet with a tiny little window and a little cot. Like, it's a really, really small situation for, again, a massive house. However, who is Millie to complain, right? She has nothing. She lives in her car. One other thing that's weird about the housemaid quarters is that there are scratches on the inside of the door of the little closet that she would be living in. There's also something that she can't put her finger on that's creeping her out about the room. And she later realizes that it is the fact that it locks from the outside, which is obviously really spooky, but also I'm a little confused about how you could notice that but not be able to put your finger on it. That doesn't quite make sense to me. But yeah, not the ideal situation to be living in someone else's home and not have control over whether you get privacy or whether you're stuck in your room. Millie in general is a little bit too stupid to live, which I understand that's a pretty common thing for the protagonist in a thriller book, but I really struggle with, am I supposed to root for this person? Am I supposed to like this person? Because she is also just not very nice. Like, she is sitting in this interview with this very wealthy woman who's giving her really what seems like the opportunity of a lifetime, right? And she's noticing that her legs are stocky. Like, she keeps thinking like, wow, her legs are really big. This won't be the last time that we talk about Millie looking at her employer, who seemingly is a great person, at least right now, and thinking about how unattractive and undesirable and overweight she is. But I just struggle to figure out whether I'm on Millie's side or not. On this tour of the home, Millie also meets Cecilia, and it's totally by chance. Her daughter just so happens to be there, which I just find very strange. Like, even if her job description wasn't partially taking care of your kid, she's going to be like living in the house with you and your family. So you would maybe want her to, meet everybody. What if this girl hates kids? And I just wonder why Frieda McFadden would even write it this way. Like, what difference does it make narratively? Whether you have the girl just kind of wander in by chance, or whether you say, hey, this is my daughter and it's really important that you guys get along well. A lot about this book just doesn't feel thought through. It doesn't feel edited. And this is one of those times. I don't think this is an example of this, but in the movie, there are a lot of things that are made to make more sense than they do in the book. And it made me realize, like, oh, I'm not the only one who doesn't understand this, because if the book made perfect sense, they wouldn't have changed that for the movie. Aside from that, I actually thought the part where we meet Cecilia is really funny and Millie's first impression. So I have a quote for you. Do you know those movies about the scary cult of like creepy kids who can read minds and worship the devil and live in cornfields or something? Well, if they were casting for one of those movies, this girl would get the part. They wouldn't even have to audition her. They would take one look at her and be like, yes, you are creepy girl number 3. She's pale. She has this kind of blank stare. She wears what Millie describes as, quote, a creepy Victorian ghost child's outfit. Both Nina and Cecilia are pretty much always wearing white clothes head to toe, and they're always looking pristine. I think it's almost well executed, but there just always has to be a moment where Millie thinks this is really creepy. And it just undermines any creepiness for me. Like, creep me out. Don't tell me that Millie's creeped out. As the interview draws to a close, Millie kind of starts to picture her life here, and she's really just tuning everything out. Mrs. Winchester is blabbering on and on and on, and Millie's like not listening hardly at all. So remember that, because it will come up again later. As she's leaving the interview, there's a landscaper out front who looks at her and kind of shakes his head like this. Very Get Out, very spooky. Quite effective. As much as I don't think this book is that well written and I don't root for Millie all that much, I do think that her situation in life is thought-provoking, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. There are some pretty big red flags in this interview, right? The landscaper out front, the weird housemaid quarters with scratches on the inside of the door, and the child. Like, there's just some weird stuff happening. Millie doesn't have the freedom to really even pay attention to the negatives of this job because she's so desperate for it. And I think that there is some commentary and something to chew on there, even though I don't think Frieda McFadden does a great job of diving into that. Of course, there wouldn't be a book to read, and it wouldn't be called The Housemaid if Millie didn't get offered the position and also accept it. She gets a call about a week later from Nina asking how soon she can start, and she says, I'll start right away, babe. I'm on my way. She pulls up to the house and can't figure out the gate. She doesn't know how to get in, and she sees the landscaper guy who shook his head at her during the interview. And she's like, hey, can you help me? Can you help me? And he doesn't really respond to anything. We later learn it's because he's from Italy and can't really speak English. But as he's kind of walking over, she's like, whoa, this guy's kind of hot. We later learn his name is Enzo. Despite the language barrier, he does ultimately figure out she's just asking to be helped in, and he does help her. And then she says, gracias. Oopsie, I think that was Spanish. This becomes a trend in her conversations with Enzo. She always has this little quirky moment where she accidentally speaks Spanish, and oh my gosh, how silly of me. And it's just kind of grating in my opinion. I get that it's an attempt at comedy. It didn't really land for me. And I also yet again wonder, why would I like this girl? She's so annoying. She gets into the gate, parks her car, whatever, and she's walking up to the house. And right before Nina opens the door, Enzo says a word to Millie, pericolo. And she doesn't know what it means, but she later looks it up and realizes that it translates to danger from Italian. It does seem a little unlikely to me that she would be able to remember this word this many hours later, but this guy really seems to be trying to deter her from working here. I wonder why that is. When she gets into the house, Nina pretty much right away gives her a brand new iPhone. Millie's been using a pay-as-you-go phone, and obviously that's not going to work. Nina has a ton of money. She can afford to buy Millie a phone, and that way she has a reliable way of contacting her. Then Mr. Winchester himself appears, and I audibly groaned when I read this part of the book because it's just a tale as old as time, okay? She looks at him and she's like, wow, that's a man, okay? He's hot. Everyone in this book, with the exception of Nina, who is disgusting, is hot as hell. Andrew, hottest man I've ever seen. Oh, wait. Enzo, hottest man I've ever seen. Nina, gross. Oh my gosh. Millie is really hot. And Millie's also the horniest woman ever. All right. Now, there is a level of horniness that I would totally expect from a woman who was locked up from the ages of 16 and 26. That's a long time to be without men. And that window of your life, those are big years for a woman. You know, her horniness is to a degree that I found difficult to stomach. Of course, it can't just be Millie looking at Andrew thinking about how perfect his hair color is or how sexy his chin cleft is, although she is thinking both of those things, naturally. She's also thinking about how out of his wife's league he is. And I have a quote for you about that. It's also hard not to notice that he is several levels more attractive than his wife, even with her impeccable grooming, which strikes me as a bit strange. This man is filthy rich, after all. He could have any woman he wants. I respect him for not choosing a 20-year-old supermodel to be his life partner. So what I'm hearing is he's made hotter to you by his willingness to be married to a woman who is, I guess, ugly and age appropriate. Wow. Andrew seems completely caught off guard by this new woman in the house. It seems like maybe Nina didn't tell him or he forgot or something like that. But either way, he introduces himself to Millie and asks her to call him Andrew, not Mr. Winchester. Millie notices that Nina doesn't seem to like this interaction very much. She has a weird look on her face, and Millie's just confused as to why that would be. And I'm confused as to how you're confused, Millie, because you just mentally undressed this man right in front of his wife. And also those thoughts were largely disparaging to her. You were thinking, wow, how does she know what to do with all that, pretty much? So maybe that telegraphed across your face. Also, he's being maybe more friendly than she would like with this sexy new young nanny. We're not going to act like a woman being maybe a little snippy or short with you after watching you look her husband up and down with your mouth hanging open and drool running out is a sin. Because it's not. Nina also asks Millie about her glasses. She was wearing glasses in the interview and now she's not. And Millie's like, oh yeah, I'm wearing my contacts today, which is a lie, by the way. Millie wore the glasses in the interview to look smart, and it actually worked. That classic movie trick, the Superman Clark Kent thing, worked because Nina hired a frumpy nerd, or so she thought. But it's actually a hot, gorgeous bombshell who entered her house, and the glasses made all the difference. The first day is a pretty rough start to this job, to say the least. Nina is basically the messiest person ever. When Millie was here a week ago, I will remind you, the place was completely pristine, and now there are 3 loads of dishes in the sink. There is trash strewn everywhere. There's food in the trash. Like, who could possibly live in such a way that this type of mess was made in just 7 days by a family of 3? It seems incomprehensible. Like, you would have to be intentionally making a mess in order to get the house in this kind of state. But Millie cleans it, you know, she's doing her job. And then the daughter, Cecilia, shows up and she's demanding a snack, but she won't give any information as to what she likes to eat. Millie finds a jar of peanut butter, a banana, and some crackers, and she's like, this is a great snack. I ate this as a kid all the time. So she puts together a little snack plate. Cecilia runs crying to her mother about Millie forcing her to eat peanut butter, which she's allergic to. She's like, I told her that I couldn't eat this, and she wanted me to eat it anyway. And Nina's like, girl, we talked about this. You know that Cecilia's allergic to peanut butter. And Millie's like, you did not tell me that. This is a direct quote from the book about what Millie's thinking. She never said a word about Cecilia being allergic to peanuts. I would bet my life on it. Your life? You would bet your life on it. What about the time at the interview where she was yammering on and you were tuning her out and thinking about your future life in this house? because it seems like maybe it would have come up then, or it might have. You've had like 3 conversations with this woman, and one of them, you tuned her out for a significant portion of it, and you're willing to stake everything on the fact that she didn't tell you something that she probably told you. Let's be honest. The cherry on top of this amazing first day Sunday is that Millie wakes up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, goes to open the door, and it's locked. It won't open. And she jiggles it a little bit and then starts thinking about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh, let me try to call 911. There's no service. I can't call 911. It's obviously spooky that she doesn't have service in this room. I find it very unlikely that her phone couldn't even reach emergency services, because almost always, especially newer phones, can get through at least to 911. But anyway, it doesn't end up mattering because the door opens right away when she makes another attempt. So was it locked? Was it stuck? Like, what's going on? Definitely really, really spooky, and not what I would want in my first night in my new room. Day 2 is not much better. Nina has a PTA meeting later on, which those are serious business. Okay. If you've ever read a book about rich ladies, the drama at the PTA, you don't want to mess with it. You make one false move, they're gossiping about you for the next decade at least. So Nina's on edge about this meeting, and she claims that she had notes for it sitting on the kitchen counter and they are gone, and it was definitely Millie. Nina's technique for searching for these papers and like her way of handling it is unconventional, to say the least. Allow me to read a passage from the text. She's pulled every pot and pan from the cabinet below the counter. She's ripped half the dishes from above the sink, and several of them are lying broken on the kitchen floor. And now she's going through the refrigerator, haphazardly tossing food onto the floor. I watch in amazement as she takes an entire container of milk out of the refrigerator and hurls it onto the floor. Milk immediately started gushing out, forming a white river around the pots and pans and broken dishes. Can you imagine a person acting like this? And do you feel scared imagining someone acting like this? I personally don't, and I think this thriller would be so much better if it was a little bit more of a slow build. Nina in the interview is a nice, normal lady, and then the second that Millie pulls up to actually work the job, she is insane right away, right? And I think that this book would be so much scarier and so much more thrilling and so much more realistic if it seemed like Nina was holding it together most of the time and every now and then we would see the crack. Or if she was pretty normal and then it was just a slow descent into her being crazy. But as you've seen, right away when Millie moves in, Nina is just kind of different and crazy in a way that she wasn't before. And then we just get bombarded with more examples of her being insane. And it feels like Frieda McFadden sat down, spent 5 minutes writing bullet points of like, these are crazy things that a woman could do and people would think she was crazy. And then she was like, I have to include all of these. If I skip even one of these, people might not understand that Nina's a crazy woman. And again, I think there is something interesting to be said of like, Millie can't leave. She doesn't feel like she can leave because she is in a bad situation and she needs this job. And I think that with a thriller of this variety, the thrilling nature of it should come from, oh my gosh, what would I do if I was in this situation? To be honest, I think I would probably prefer prison over working for this psychotic lady. Andrew's like, didn't you type up these notes? Just go reprint them. And Nina has a long explanation about, well, I partially did, but I forgot to save it. And so I can print out what I have, but I have to go right now and it won't be complete. And in the movie, they fixed this by just saying she wrote them by hand. Did Frieda McFadden actually think through anything fully in this book? Why were the notes not just handwritten? It's a way bigger deal if she lost a handwritten one-of-a-kind note than if it's something that she printed. And in the movie, they made that change and it makes no negative impact, but it just makes everything make way more sense. Nina scurries off to reprint the part of her notes that she can salvage. And Andrew's like, hey, Millie, that was not your fault. I don't know what Nina's deal is, but let me help you with this. And he starts rolling up his sleeves. And the combination of him being helpful and exposing his forearms is sending Millie into a tizzy, naturally. That night, while Nina's gone at her PTA meeting, Millie cooks for Andrew and Cecilia, and she decides to make a steak dinner, and he invites her to sit down and eat with them. And she has this thought, I have another quote, I probably shouldn't have made steak for a 9-year-old girl. I just assumed she had to have highbrow taste. This part of the book confused me so much because 9 years old, it's not like Cecilia's a baby. Having a 9-year-old eat a piece of steak is not that crazy, at least to me. When I was 9, yeah, my parents would sometimes buy steak from the grocery store and grill it up. But I didn't realize that may be a part of the royal family. Time for our speed round of Nina being crazy. I said that this whole chunk of the book is really just a supercut of those moments. and we're in it now. Okay, so at one point, Millie is bringing in groceries from the store, and Enzo, the hot landscaper, we know him, he helps her carry them in. And Nina catches them doing that, and she scolds Millie for letting him into the house because he's too dirty. Nina, as we know, she keeps a very clean house, all right? She has very consistent standards on that. Millie, in front of Nina's PTA friends, calls Nina by her first name, which is what she was asked to call her, but this is a common thing. Nina just acts totally different around her friends. Again, we understand rich ladies care a lot about what the PTA moms think of them, so I guess it's not that crazy. If you didn't believe me before about Nina being filthy, disgusting, gross, Millie finds a used tampon on the floor of her bathroom, just sitting there on the floor. That's foul. Remember that whole thing about Millie wearing glasses and saying, oh yeah, I'm wearing contacts? Well, Nina's onto her, okay? Because she's been snooping through Millie's cabinets in her bathroom and finds no contact solution. So you lied. Don't lie to me again. That's the conversation they have. This one makes my blood boil. Okay, so Nina calls Millie and asks her to pick up Cecilia from school, which she's never done before. And she doesn't really give a lot of information. Pickup is in like 15 minutes. And she just kind of says the name of the school and hangs up and then becomes unreachable. The name of the school that she says isn't actually correct. Millie can't find this school and she's trying to call Nina back, can't get a hold of her. But she ultimately finds something that's like stuck to the fridge. I think it's a flyer or some kind of magnet that has the name of the school on it. And so she's ready to scurry off and, pick up the girl. And she struggles to park. I mean, this whole thing, it's just like a series of frustrations for Millie, but she's trying to do her job. She arrives at the school and finds Cecilia going off with her friend and her friend's mom to be driven to karate practice, which is apparently what they do every single week on, I think it was Wednesday. So she's like, what the hell? Why did Nina call me frantically asking me to pick up Cecilia? And the mom, the friend's mom, is like, let's just clear this up really quick. I'll give Nina a call. And of course, Millie's thinking, I've been trying to give her a call. She's unreachable. But what does Nina do? She answers the call right away. And Millie overhears the mom talking to Nina and being like, I know, it's so hard to find help these days. Clearly talking about how much of an idiot Millie is for showing up. And then Millie gets a text from Nina that's like, I did not ask you to do that. You're so stupid. Why would you even think such a thing? I must reiterate, I'm not scared of this woman. I just think she's crazy and rude, and that this probably is worse than prison. This isn't all for nothing, though, because while she's at the school, she gets some gossip from other moms who are like, oh my gosh, that lady you're working for, yeah, she's nuts. And Millie's like, really? Do you think so? And decides to rifle through Nina's medicine cabinet, which I guess is an eye for an eye because, Nina was rifling through her stuff looking for contact solution. She does ultimately find a lot of pills, one of which is an antipsychotic when she looks it up. I'm just curious why somebody's saying she's crazy, like not explaining any kind of medical condition or anything, but just saying that lady's crazy. Why would that be news to you at all? This woman is obviously crazy. I guess getting a second opinion on it just made her think, I wonder if a doctor would agree. And it turns out, yes. While we're on the topic, this whole section of Nina doing crazy stuff, she is not alone in that, okay? Millie is participating as well. So this whole part, which is about like the second quarter of the book, contains some crimes of Millie's, aside from just rifling through her boss's medicine cabinet. So let's go through a couple of them. One day, Nina comes to Millie and says, hey, I'm getting rid of a bunch of my clothes. What size are you? And so Millie tells her, and Nina's like, okay, perfect. I have a bunch of dresses that I'm going to give you. And that's pretty exciting because these people are rich. These are nice clothes. And Millie thinks to herself, how does she have a size 6? She's like size 14 at least. Girl, how do we think clothes work? Has Nina been a size 14 since birth? No. Let's use our brains. Like, why does she not want these clothes anymore, do you think? Maybe because they don't fit. Not even a page later, Miss McFadden describes Nina laughing and, quote, it says, her double chin wobbles. We get it, okay? Nina's fatter than Millie. Am I supposed to like Millie? Because she sounds like a bitch. Like, I'm sorry. Her behavior alone gives you so much material. I don't even know how you have time to focus on her weight or her appearance or how much food she's eating, all of which Millie is thinking about constantly, okay? I hate this girl. She's so judgy. Millie is kind of restless one night. She can't sleep and she just really wants to kind of get out of her room and notices that nobody is in the living area. So she turns on the TV and is sitting on the couch, like just kind of minding her business, watching some Family Feud. And who should come out but Mr. Andrew Winchester? And I feel like there was probably something at this point said about how dreamy he looked. There always is every single time he shows up. He plops down next to her, of course, and he says, "Would it be really bad manners if I eat some peanut butter out of the jar?" Yeah, it would. But she says no. She also makes a joke at this point about Cecilia's peanut allergy. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" "What do you mean, what am I talking about? Your daughter's allergic to peanut butter." Apparently, she's not. That's really weird. Of course they get caught watching Family Feud because there's no delayed gratification in this book. Nina walks out and is like, "What's going on here?" Millie blurts out, for some reason, "Nothing was going on between me and Andrew." Yeah, nothing was. Like, why are you saying that? She literally, all Nina said was, "Hey, I'd probably rather you didn't wander around my house at night when my family and I are not out here, you know?" And to be fair, I think if you're going to enforce that, the housemaid quarters should be enough for someone to entertain themselves. Like, maybe put a TV up there. That's all she said. And then Millie's basically like, "Your husband and I aren't sleeping together." I mean, stop. Like, why are you saying that? And Nina's like, "Respectfully, I'm really not threatened by you. I'm not worried about you and my husband. And by the way, you can clean up this place because it looks a mess." And she's like obviously referring to the glass of water that Andrew is currently drinking out of, which is hilarious to me. Nina storms off, and then Millie, quote, "without even thinking," just throws Andrew's water glass on the ground. She tolerates so much from Nina that is so much crazier than this, but this one moment is enough for her to just fly off the handle and break a glass without even thinking. Andrew and Millie's bonding is about to get a whole lot worse, okay? This part is pretty foul, in my opinion. So Nina is hosting a PTA meeting this time at their house. She's berating Millie the entire time, and it's really upsetting to her. I mean, it's obvious that she's trying to tear this woman down, right? Millie kind of steps aside, and she starts crying a little bit, and Andrew comes to the rescue, naturally. And he finds a crumpled up tissue in his pocket that he forgot he had, and he offers it to her. And not only does she use it, but she kind of like huffs it a little bit. She smells it. She's like, smells like him. She is so desperate for this man that she is gratefully wiping her face with a mysterious tissue that of unknown origins. Like, it's in his pocket. Who knows what's on it, how long it's been there. I mean, you are disgusting, Millie. Andrew and Millie are having a conversation one night, and he shares with her that Cecilia is actually not his daughter biologically. He and Nina got together when she was a baby, and he would love to have a baby of his own with Cecilia, but they recently, with Nina. Yeah. He would like to conceive a child of his own with his wife, Nina, but they actually found out recently that Nina is unable to conceive at all. So that is not going to happen. And obviously they're upset about this. One night, Millie overhears them having an argument. They're screaming at each other. She hears a loud crash, and she walks out and sees just Nina. Andrew is nowhere to be seen, and there's blood on her nightgown. And so she gets really freaked out, but Nina sees her and is like, "You need to go back to your quarters, girl. Like, you're invading our privacy," pretty much. But Millie is worried about her man, you know. She's worried about Andrew, but luckily she hears the faucet running out of sight. So she's like, "Okay, Andrew's fine. I can go back up to bed." Millie's horniness is reaching unprecedented levels. Okay, she needs to do something about this. And she's like, ideally, it would be Andrew because I'm basically in love with him, but he's kind of unavailable. He's married, you know, so maybe that landscaper guy might be into it. Okay, so she decides to make a move. One day she presents him with a glass of water, and she's like, she's trying to put the moves on him. And as he's drinking it, she's thinking about how good in bed he seems like he's going to be. And, you know, I've never known women to think about men in this way. It's something that happens in books all the time. Controversial opinion, man, woman, I don't care. It's weird to look at someone that you don't know and that you don't have a relationship with and think about them having sex with you. Like, that is weird. Sorry. You're a little freaked out if you're thinking that way, okay? She's kind of like advancing toward him. She keeps asking him to take a break with her, you know, take a break, wink, wink. But he, you know, there's a language barrier. He doesn't understand what she's saying. And so she wants to make it obvious and decides to put her hand on his chest to kind of make it clear. She says, and I quote, "I had expected at this point he would grin at me, scoop me off my feet, and carry me up to the attic where he would ravish me for hours. This is all based on the fact that he is hot, not wearing a wedding ring, and like interacting with you at a surface level. And he's rightfully disgusted, and he walks off, and you know, it doesn't happen. So sorry, Millie." Remember how the NPCs at Cecilia's school were like, "Nina's a crazy woman. Oh my gosh, she's crazy." Well, Millie meets another woman exactly like that, who spills even a little bit more tea about her employer than she previously knew. Her name's Amanda, by the way, and when she finds out that Millie works for Nina, she shares that when Cecilia was a baby, Nina apparently tried to drown her in the bathtub while Andrew was away. Okay, now you got me. I'm scared of Nina. Nothing she said or done up to this point has been like actually dangerous seeming, but this kind of kicks off the actual plot portion of the book. We've gotten through the segments that are just scene setting of like sexy husband, crazy wife, weird child. What's going to happen? Things actually start to happen now, okay? Get excited. Andrew comes to Millie and asks her for help planning a trip to New York City for him and Nina to get away. There's a Broadway show. I forget what it's called. It's not real. But he really wants to take Nina to see it and is wondering what weekend they should go. And so Millie asks Nina and she's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. A week from Sunday. This is another infuriating miscommunication. I really should have done a tally reading the book, but it's probably like 50 at least. Anyway, Millie goes to Nina when the trip is like 3 days out and reminds her, and Nina's like, what? I said a week from Sunday, as if Millie booked the tickets yesterday and not like a week ago. And she says pretty much like, that doesn't work for me. She's going to be taking Cecilia to summer camp, which is a couple states away or something like that, and staying out of town overnight. So she can't make it this weekend. Nina tells Millie that because it's her fault, she is going to have to eat the cost. Pretty much, it's going to come out of her paycheck. And Millie's not happy about that. She cannot afford that. But Andrew reassures her like, hey, I'm going to get the tickets refunded. It's NBD, girl. You're fine. So the day comes when they are kind of waving off Nina and Cecilia to drive to her summer camp, right? Millie says to Nina kind of offhandedly that she's really going to miss Cecilia. And Nina's like, really? I thought you couldn't stand her. Genuinely, why would you employ someone who you think hates your kid? Who is this working for? Nobody likes anyone. I think Cecilia hates Millie, and Nina thought Millie hates Cecilia, which she kind of does. Nina and Millie don't get along, and the only people who do get along are the two who should not, which is Millie and, you know, her employer's husband. Nina and Cecilia are off, and Andrew comes to Millie and is like, hey, so good news, bad news. I couldn't get the tickets refunded, but I think you should go. You know, invite somebody with you, get the weekend away. Like, I'm good here all by myself. Totally fine. And Millie's like, oh, this is awkward. I don't have anyone that I talk to ever. In a totally unpredictable move, Andrew offers to go with Millie. He says, and I quote, I know Nina has jealousy issues, but that's no reason to let these expensive tickets go to waste. Are the jealousy problems in question the fact that you guys are obviously attracted to each other? Or the fact that you're going to go away with a woman who isn't your wife while she's away without telling her? Like, that's not a jealousy problem. That's like normal human critical thinking. It's very obvious where this is going. And honestly, it was really obvious from the second that she saw him and thought about how hot he was. I'm like, oh, they're going to sleep together. Like, that's just obviously going to happen. And I really am questioning whether Frieda McFadden is trying to make me feel okay with this obvious infidelity by telling me, oh, Nina's crazy, by the way. Oh, Nina tried to kill her daughter. And I'm just going to say this. Psychotic women also deserve faithful husbands. If you're not going to be faithful to your wife, divorce your wife. I'm obviously not in support of this blossoming romance between these two, but I feel like Frieda McFadden wants me to be. And I would be curious if you somehow are still here and you're a fan of The Housemaid, what was your view of this relationship? Were you into it? Did you want them to get together? Millie decides to finally crack open the formal clothes that Nina gave her because she's going to a fancy event tonight, okay? And she's shocked when the clothes fit her. Once again, how do you think clothes work? She literally says, I had assumed since Nina is quite a bit heavier than I am, it would be loose on me. Are you really so stupid as to think that clothes that say they're your size are actually not because someone who's fat gave them to you? Like, I don't understand this. The dress, of course, is white because that's all Nina wears, but it also defies physics in ways that I can't wrap my mind around. I mean, I read sci-fi, fantasy. Nothing eludes me more than the magic system that is this dress that Millie wears to the Broadway show. It sounds like it's kind of a bandage dress, so it sits right above her knee. It fits tightly, but it fits well. It's just more of a snug dress. The whole night she has to stop this dress from like removing itself from her body. This is the only way I can describe it. Like, this dress is hell-bent on Millie becoming naked. She's sitting in the car on the way to the show, and again, this dress falls just above the knee. She's sitting down, so I would expect it to come, like, I don't know, mid-thigh or something. She keeps having to yank it down because her underwear is showing. What kind of underwear are you wearing? How are they almost showing when you're sitting down in a knee-length dress. You know, I've never worn a dress like that in my life. She pulls it down and it springs right back up, and I just want to know, what is this fabric content? It's crazy. Also, Andrew keeps staring at her legs, and it's really only when she's sitting down, which is the crazy part. Like, she's sitting in the car next to him, and he keeps looking at the tops of her thighs. And like, women have gorgeous bodies, okay? I'm not denying such a thing. But I feel like the worst my legs ever look is when I'm sitting down in a car with my thighs exposed. But the tops of her thighs are like hypnotic to this guy. Okay, he's really into her. He can barely keep his eyes on the road the whole way there. As they pull up to the theater, Millie gets a text from Nina that is a reminder to take out the trash tonight. It's incredibly predictable at this point that Millie is going to forget to take out the trash, or that she's not going to get back in time to take out the trash, right? That is especially true because of this quote right here. Nina always reminds me about trash day every single week, even though I've never once forgotten. This is the first time I'm hearing about trash at all. I don't remember exactly how far into the book this is. If you want me as the reader to know that Nina always reminds her unnecessarily to take out the trash, why couldn't you have her remind her unnecessarily even once up to this point? Why can we not do that? Why am I hearing about this for the first time now, when it's like, this thing always happens? It's so annoying. This is just some of the worst, like, telling not showing that I've ever seen. Aside from the text, Millie and Andrew have a perfect night together, and frequently in Millie's mind, because we're in her mind, or she's telling us this story or whatever, she keeps talking about how platonic this relationship is. It's so platonic. Oh my gosh, nothing's ever gonna happen, even though he's so sexy and I'm so sexy. And we both think that about each other, and we're alone, and he hates his wife and I hate his wife. Like, obviously something's going to happen. But here's some other evidence that, of course, they're going to, get it on tonight. First of all, he says the look on her face is cute when she's looking around at the theater. He chooses an expensive French restaurant for them to eat dinner at. Very, very friendly type of place to eat, obviously. He puts his hand on the small of her back when they're walking into the restaurant. Again, that's strictly platonic. He does start crap talking Nina and talks about how she's nothing like the woman that he fell in love with, and he doesn't even recognize her anymore. It's super normal to vent to another woman about your wife and how you're not in love with her anymore, especially when that person is hot and also thinks you're hot. He also tells her that since they found out Nina can't have a baby, they have not had sex once. Also, really normal information to disclose to your employee and a younger woman that you find attractive. Anyway, he drinks too much wine at dinner, so they can't drive back tonight. And of course, they have to stay at the Plaza Hotel. I mean, must we? In the taxi on the way to the hotel, Millie catches Andrew staring at the tops of her thighs again. And I just want to stress to you one more time, he never compliments her on her legs when she's standing up, which is just objectively when your legs look the best. What fascination does this man have with the tops of women's legs? I must know. But anyway, she calls him on it. She's like, hey, you're looking at me. And he goes, you have great legs and there's no harm in looking. You're disgusting. Moments later, they're kind of thrown around in the back seat by that classic NYC driving, jostled around, and they end up on top of each other. Oopsies. We have to make out now, obviously. Conveniently, right before this, Millie was actually making some edits to her "this is totally platonic and nothing's going to happen between us" routine. Here's something she thinks to herself right before she and Andrew share their first smoochy smooch, okay? As far as I can see, she's been horrible to him the whole time I've been working there. He deserves so much better. Using "he deserves better" as justification to sleep with a married man is bottom of the barrel behavior. And again, I'm not convinced that Frieda McFadden would agree. Am I supposed to be into them making out? I kind of think I am, and I'm so not into it. Millie has, I guess, what you could call a moment of clarity. She's like, I don't know that we should stay in the same room, which of course there's only one room booked. He booked it for him and his wife. And he says, and I quote, "You don't trust me?" When she says maybe they should get separate rooms. No man who deserves better has ever said, "You don't trust me," to a woman to try to get him to stay in the same hotel room as him. Yuck. Of course, they sleep together, and Millie describes the sex as, quote, freaking amazing. So that's a done deal. I think that's a good place to adjourn for part one. I wasn't really planning on doing two separate parts of this, but I've been talking forever, and the sun is going down, and I'm not even halfway through my notes. So seems as good a sign as any to pick up the remainder of this story on a different day. As much as I don't want to carve out a niche of being a hater on the internet, It's fun to talk about stuff that's bad, and some things are bad enough that they warrant some negativity, and I think this is one of those things, and I hope that you agree, or at least that you're enjoying hearing my opinions about this book and why I think it's terrible. Also, give me a like and leave a comment if you've read this book. Did you think the same thing I did about it? I would love to know just any of your feelings or thoughts, what you're feeling spoiled by today, any of the above. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I hope to talk your ear off again one day very soon. Bye!